Alrighty, good morning everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Brian Munkapunsuk, Customer Success Manager here at KETIV Technologies, and I'm also joined by my good friend and colleague, Jose Paredes Clara, who's one of our application engineers here at KETIV, who specializes in Autodesk Vault. How's it going, Jose?
Hey Brian, how are you?
Good, good. So without further ado, this is going to be on what's new in Inventor and Vault 2021. Jose will be going into some of the workflows and tools that has to offer. With that said, I'll go ahead and pass it off to you, Jose. Take it away.
All right, thanks Brian. Yeah, so like Brian mentioned, we're gonna go over what's new in Inventor and Vault, primarily, how they interact with some of the new functionality in there. Just go ahead and, if you wouldn't mind typing it in the chat, what version of Vault you're currently on. Just because today we will be looking at the functions that come with Vault Professional, some of them, but a lot of the other stuff that we're going to see is actually in Vault in general. So just going to take a couple minutes here, wait for you guys to type in the versions that you're working on, and that way we can get a better idea of who's on here and what to tailor it to today. And I'm seeing a lot of older versions here. So again, this is what's new in 2021. Hopefully this means that moving forward, it might give you some more reasons to move to 2021, maybe some functionality that would help you guys in your environment here. A lot of you, it looks like, or some of you aren't using Vault yet. So hopefully this gives you an idea of what the tool looks like as well. All right, so we got a good amount of answers here. It looks like a lot of you aren't on 2021 yet. So hopefully, again, this gives you that final push or prepares you for that move to 2021 when you guys jump into it. Just quickly overview here of Vault. It's a PDM system. It manages your CAD files, whether they be Autodesk CAD, Inventor, AutoCAD, Plant, any of those CAD files can be managed inside of Vault. It keeps track of their versions. It makes sure that users are editing the files one at a time. Today, we're going to look at the integration or the workflow with Inventor, which is an Autodesk CAD software. A lot of you are already using it. So we're going to look at that today. It's really nice. It works best. I'm not saying that it doesn't work well with other CAD tools like SolidWorks or Creo, but it works best with Inventor just because they're cut from the same cloth. They're fully integrated. As far as in Inventor, we'll see there's an add-in in there that you can use, and some really cool functions there that you can work through. And again, if you haven't used Vault yet, what you can look into here is working with files locally on your computer. So typically what Vault ends up replacing is a workflow where your files are located on a network drive and you're opening them up from that location. What you may notice in those cases is a sort of degradation in functionality or speeds of the files. Typically this happens because it's constantly pinging back and forth to the network, causing that file to constantly need to be updated and in communication. Vault relieves that by downloading the file locally to your computer where you can make the edits. Once you're done with the edits, you can upload them into the Vault and make sure that they're available for everyone else that's using the Vault. What that also allows is, because you're downloading the files locally, when you do that, you can gain a reservation on the file. So think of a library where, and I'm talking physical library, the ones that we can go to right now, but where you have to check out a book in order to take it home and read it. Same thing here. Before you, or if you want to make edits to these files in Vault, you're gonna have to download it to your local computer, but you're also going to need a reservation on it. This reservation allows allows you to make edits, but it also allows other users to see that someone else is working on it, um, making sure that people don't step on their toes. Once you're done making these edits, you end up just placing it back in the Vault. It captures the edits that you've made and makes them available to everyone else. So that's Vault in a nutshell, and we'll be seeing some of these new functionalities inside of Vault help with that process. Now, some of you mentioned that you were on Vault Basic. I'm currently presenting on Vault Professional, so you'll see some additional workspaces inside of Vault that may not be available to you, as well as some of the functionality that we're going to go over centralizes over ECOs as well. So this change order list, again, it is a functionality within Vault Professional. Out of those who are using Vault Professional now, would you mind typing into the chat as well, seeing if you're using this ECO process within Vault? And if you're not, what form of ECO are you using? Just because we do have ECO functionality in Vault Professional, but there are other tools like PLM specifically, PLM tools that handle change orders. We're talking Fusion Lifecycle, or what's the other one I was talking about? Point is, there are multiple ways to handle these change orders. So, if you're using Vault Professional, are you using the ECO workspace in there? And if you're on Vault Basic, like some of you are, how are you handling your change orders currently? So go ahead and type that in, and then we can take a look at some ways to improve that.
Or if you don't know what an ECO is, you can type that in as well.
Yeah, I mean, they go by different names: engineering change notification, ECRs, stuff like that. All right, we're not using Vault ECO. We're okay.
Doesn't look like a lot are using ECOs, if any, so far.
The biggest thing there is, and it ties back to another webinar that we did on Fusion Lifecycle not a couple of weeks ago, actually. Everyone's using this process, or PLM in general, so it's just it's called a different name, or it's done differently. So that's what I'm getting from these answers. It's being done, but it's being done in different ways. So, a lot of you aren't using ECO process, so I'm going to go over that in a few minutes as far as how that process works in Vault. That way you guys have a better idea of how it, the benefits and the some of the downsides of doing it within Vault Professional. I'm not saying Vault Professional is the best way to do it, but it is a pretty good way just because it is integrated with your files. ECOs there. And then just one last quick poll here. How many of you are using life cycles? Now, I know the people that are using Vault Basic won't be using life cycles just because they're not available. But if you're on Workgroup or Professional Vault, you will have access to them, but they won't be implemented some of the times. And while I wait for answers here on the Workgroup and Professional people, for those of you that are on Basic, you might not know what life cycles are. So life cycles in Vault, Workgroup, and Professional are a list of states that your files could be, files or items. So items you can see here is a flat list. Basically, the way that, so let's start with items, just because you won't have those available to you as well. Items are typically dictated by part number. They're individual records inside of Vault that you can have multiple files associated to. So typically you see this item number here. I have it for a certain IPT. The nice thing about items is I can have the associated drawing, the associated PDFs, pretty much any associated files that are required for this part number. I can have them listed under one record or one item. Pretty much bundles all that together, make sure that all the necessary information is available in one location. The other thing that items does really well is it handles bill of materials. So if I had a larger assembly, which I do, but not set up for items here, if you have a bill of materials which includes non-CAD line items, sometimes you need a repair kit, sometimes you need a basically a toolkit or anything along those lines that you don't really model in CAD, but you do need. You can actually deal with that inside of items and bill of materials, making those in here. Well, whether you are using items or whether you are using files, their life cycles give you a list of states that these files can be in. So I'm going to go in here to my workspace, and you'll see right now I haven't really applied any life cycles to these files just because they are in a sample state, or they're a sample assembly that I downloaded. So I haven't put them in any specific state, but these items automatically go into a life cycle. You'll see here that there's a state called work in progress. Essentially, the basic life cycle, the basic states that come are work in progress, for review, released, and a quick change typically is what you have. At these different states, what you can end up doing is applying different group permissions as to who can see them, who can edit them, and pretty much view them in general. That's the biggest one. A lot of times if a file is in, or an item is in work in progress, you don't want it to be available to the shop, whether you're using the thin client or a thick client down there. You can make it so that while it's in work in progress, anybody that is in this shop group doesn't have it available to them. So, that's life cycles. A lot of you responded whether or not you have life cycles, so that's good information to have for us. A lot of the times this helps with the workflow. Irene, I know you're on here. This is one of the things that we would want to actually talk about and make sure, we outline your process and make sure that at each state that you guys are working on, the appropriate people have access to it. But, aside from that, when you're transitioning from work in progress to review, or from review into release, things like this, you can actually set up specific jobs to happen or specific properties to be available. One of the big ones is in the later releases after 2018, you can actually set up PDFs to be generated automatically from drawings. So if PDFs are one of your, primary deliverables, you can have them automatically generated through life cycles. So once they're generated, they're placed in typically the same location of the original file, so they'll be available to people there. Any questions so far on any of this functionality? Again, please feel free to ask them now, and we can go over the improvements to this process in a little bit. All right, so, all right, let's go into some of this functionality that gets improved. For those of you that are using ECOs, question came in before I jumped the gun here. Can PDF generation be created upon release of an item and also be inserted into that item? So as far as PDF generation, with items, it's different. Typically, the PDF generation ends up working with the file life cycles, items get a little dicey. There is a way to do it, and we have done some customization for other customers that inserts it or that creates the PDF. It was not created to insert it back into the item, but we can definitely, it's not out of the box, is pretty much what I'm trying to say. It would be something that needs to be customized separately, whether it be through Cool Orange or the API itself. For those of you that are not familiar with Cool Orange, it adds additional functionalities to the Vault job processor. So generation of PDFs or anything like that. If something is not out of the box, Cool Orange can typically do it. You would just need to customize a script to do that for you. So if anybody already is using job processor and has some functionalities that may not be working out of the box, or you don't think Vault is doing properly, just let us know. We can definitely discuss that and let know or show you guys if it's something that needs to be modified in your current environment, or if it's something that Cool Orange can do separately. All right. So moving forward again, the first thing we're going to look at is ECOs. So again, if you're not using them, or if you are, we're going to look at a general overview here. So first tab here is the general tab. You have, think of it as your cover sheet. All the information that you need to pass on about this change order can be provided here. You'll see you have detailed description and the title of the ECO, which are pretty standard. But down here, you'll have a window for properties. So these can be properties that are available every time on an ECO. You know, who gets affected, what to do with any inventory that you have already. These are properties that can be created and applied down here that the users can fill out as the ECO goes through. Records here, if you have, this is pretty much the list of items or files that are currently being changed. You can see their state and pretty much the name that of the files that you're working on. This allows you to, if you're part of the ECO process, pretty much quickly get to the files or items that you're going to modify. This also allows you, if the ECO is for a creation of an item or a file or a part number, you would add it here to make sure, to make it available to everyone else who needs to check the ECO. Comments. So in this section, you will see the improvement to this ECO in 2021 actually comes in this section here. Whenever you create a comment, you will have an option to email here. So it requires an email server. So you know, it's something on the back end, on the ADMS side, that would need to be configured. Typically, you can use, depending on your company's email system, you can use that same server. For us, it goes through Google, I believe, or Outlook. But I don't have it set up on my end just because it requires, again, that proxy and server. But the customization that we're going to see is actually within the email body. Luckily, I can show you where to edit that and where that comes into play without having to send out this email. But in the ECO process, whenever anything happens in the process as far as moving it forward or moving it back, a comment gets created, which allows you to keep track of the process and the progress that has been made. So whenever a comment is generated, you'll see, of course, you see that there's an email option on here. So the template used to be rigid. So it would generate the same email with the same information every time. What we're going to see in a bit is actually how you can change that and tailor it to match the information that your users need. One of the things I mentioned earlier, that there are some downsides to using ECOs here, is the rigidity of the ECO process in here. A lot of times the users would complain that, you know, you can't custom tailor it to exactly what you need, whether it be the states that the ECO goes through, or the information that gets sent out. For flexibility, typically in those cases, what we end up recommending is a PLM or a ECO software that would benefit them. A lot of the times that would be Fusion Lifecycle, which is very, very flexible, allows you to have an ECO process that pretty much is tailor fit to your process. So we're going to look at the template that goes out there. And here, a lot of the times the confusion comes between records and files. Like I mentioned, in records, you can have items. So items don't exactly show you which files are a part of it. So what ends up happening is if you're adding items to records, when you go to files, it'll actually show you this list of files that you're currently editing and allows you to preview them. What's also nice is if you add any files that are on here that may be generated or need to be changed, can also be marked up in the same tab. So you'll have a toolbar available that allows you to either put text or freehand any notification, or sorry, any modifications that need to be done. The last two tabs here are routing and status. So when looking at a routing, there are roles that are assigned in the ECO process that allow you to progress or send back throughout this ECO process. So each state will have a responsible role that they will be assigned. And that's what a routing is. By default, right now, I'm signed in as administrator, which means I'm given pretty much every single role here to push this through. So if I were to create this, I can just go ahead and send it through to the next state. You'll see here that by default, it starts off in the create state. If I want to send it to the open state, you'll see that it automatically creates a comment, like I mentioned. And if my emails were configured, it would go ahead and send out an email. What's really nice about that is whoever is in charge of this open state, which is the change administrator, would get a notification through email automatically because they're the ones that are assigned. So you're able to submit a comment and then send it into the open state. You'll see here that it moves forward. Excuse me. So that's it. Sorry. That's the ECO process in a nutshell. It'll move forward. You'll be able to make changes, as you can see. So in the work state, you'll be able to modify or create your files. It allows you to have a check state here. There's a couple of there's two configurations to the ECOs. One has this check state, one has it removed. So either it goes from work into review or work into check. What having this check state allows is an immediate check, as it would be, to make sure that these files are valid, essentially. So is the change that was made good enough to be reviewed and go through the CCB approval, or anything like that. And just a quick question that came in: is there any new functionality that came in? As far as the new functionality, it would be this modification that I'm about to jump into here. So again, a lot of these, so for this modification here, it would be through administrator role. So if you go into your Vault settings, I believe, no, sorry, your global settings. So if you go into your global settings and then go under change orders here, this is, again, the difference between, check and standard, but I was right the first time. It is here. There is an option here to customize the email notification for change orders. Again, this is allowing you to choose, to pick and choose the information that goes out to your users. So if you go in here and customize, you'll see that you now have the option to select your default template here. By default, you'll see that it gives you the event name, which is basically what happened. Did we send it to open? Did we send it to check, or any of those? it gives you that information. It gives you the person, the vault that it was done on, the user that did it, and when it was done, as well as a list of the items and files. So pretty standard. This is what it sends right now. What's really nice though is it allows you to add any other properties that you're currently doing, or any of the properties that may be available in the ECO. So if you have, any comments, any pretty much any of the file properties or properties that we talked about can be created for ECOs. Any of this relevant information can be added. So we're going to go ahead and let's see, add number of attachments. This will go ahead and add it on here. What it can also add is any part numbers, pretty much any of the information that is available about these files, about these items, about the ECO in general. This can all be conveyed to your users when you go through it. Again, this is one of the asks that come a lot, even with Fusion Lifecycle, when you're editing the notifications that you're sending out. What information can I send out? By default, it's a rigid template, but in FLC, it can be modified. And now in Vault, it can be customized as well to send out the information that you need. Any questions on change orders right now? Okay, so that again, that's with ECOs. Whether you have them implemented or not. If there are any questions specific to that, just let me know. We can go over it. The next thing we're going to go over is the changes in interfaces between Inventor and Vault specifically. So one of the biggest things here is, the assembly that you're seeing right now is a relatively small assembly. So you're seeing there that these double red arrows here are letting me know that there's a file that's out of date. So because you're working in Vault, you're downloading local files to your computer, making changes and putting them back into Vault. Excuse me. That means also that these local files stay on your computer unless you clear them out. The way I like to think of that folder, again, is like your downloads folder. You're downloading things off of the internet. You may use them, you may read them over, but they stay on your computer until you delete them from there. So the same thing happens with Vault. There are a couple of settings that allow you to delete files once you're done with them. So that in most cases, that's best practices. Once you're done editing them, just delete them off your computer. That way, when you need to edit them again, you can just download a new copy. But in some cases, those end up staying locally. They end up staying on your working folder, and somebody else makes a modification. So somebody else checks out that file, makes a modification, uploads it into Vault. What ends up happening is that file is now out of date. In a small assembly like this, it's pretty easy to find it and go ahead, just get a new version of it, refresh the file, get the new one that you need. But in larger assemblies, it may end up being a lot more difficult to find these. One of the changes that was added in here is for local files. If you want to see only the ones that are out of date, you can go ahead and filter out your files, and you'll see that it modifies your tree to show you only the out of date files. So it's a lot easier to get a new version of them. It's a lot easier to focus on those and make sure that nothing breaks pretty much when you're refreshing them or getting a new file. So pretty neat. As far as filters, it allows you to sort through them a lot easier. Again, for large files, very helpful. For small assemblies like this one, pretty easy to go through there. The next thing we're going to look at, and you can probably see it here, is dark mode in 2021. And it may not be something that is huge, but a lot of people prefer it. And not just with Inventor, it's with other software as well. Having a dark mode available for your software. So if we go to tools here, go to application options, and then under colors, you actually have an option to change it from light to dark and dark to light. This is, again, personal preference on how it works. It changes a lot. Pretty much all of the icons get switched back and forth, which is why it takes a little while for it to switch back and forth here. But it's something that was asked for a lot on the forums and finally got implemented in 2021. And that's the nice thing, again, about Autodesk in general, from what I've heard from colleagues and customers alike. A lot of the things that are implemented year to year are actually asked for by the users. So by you guys, if there are any functionality that you guys are missing or things should be added, definitely there's an idea station for Autodesk. Go ahead and put your idea. The more people upvoted, the more that people have interest in it, the more likely it is to catch Autodesk's attention and have them implement it. Dark mode was one of those. As you can see, I can switch back and forth and then apply it, and it'll change back to dark mode. A lot of these functionalities that you'll see here were asked for, including the next one that I'm going to show you, which is duplicate search. Go here and wait for this to change. So to answer your question, Claudio, the sorry, the file open window maintains its original color, so it does not apply to the file open window. Just to follow up on that, is there any specific just reason why you would want it to apply to the file open window, or just preference kind of thing? All right. So gotcha. Yeah. So the change in darkness to bright could be an issue, especially yeah, if it's a big contrast there. Definitely understandable. The next thing we're going to look at is duplicate search. So there's a couple of ways that duplicate search works. This one was a big one where for Vault and Inventor. So I'm going to jump back and forth. First, we're going to look at Vault. The nice thing about duplicate search is the way it used to function is by file name. So you wouldn't be able to create or upload a file that already existed into Vault. It would tell you there's a filter that you can turn on. So if you go to Tools, Administration, and Vault Settings, you'll see that Enforce Unique File Names is turned on, or can be turned on. Typically, when you're first starting off in Vault, you're turning it off. So yeah, sorry. When you're implementing Vault in general, at first you're turning it off, because what ends up happening is your files are not as organized or managed typically outside of Vault. So you want to go ahead and allow pretty much all your files to be uploaded into Vault, and then handle the duplicates, basically replacing files that may already exist and assigning them all. But what ends up happening is, because you have multiple designers, you end up having the same file, but with a different name, just added in there. Some may have a dash, some may have a dot, pretty much on the gauge or anything like that. Some may use fractions, some may use decibels as far as the size, but they're the same geometry. What Vault ended up adding in 2021 and in 2020 at the last update that was released was duplicate search, but by geometry. So you can see here, you have a duplicates dashboard that I have turned on. And in here, I have basically a list of duplicates that are in my vault. And then they're grouped into 3 different shapes. So it may be the same gear, it may be the same, bolt or anything like that. It's able to search through it, through my files, and basically let me know, hey, these are the same files. What's nice in here is if I view the duplicates report, it gives me a list. So first of all, it groups them into the unique shapes, and it gives me a list of the files that it says are identical and tells me where they are. So this allows you to go through this list and, well, okay, yeah, these were all generated by different users, it looks, and placed into different locations, but they're the same file. This report here can actually be exported into PDF and saved on wherever you need, so that you can actually keep it and bring it up when you need to. So I'm gonna go to my desktop here. And this is the duplicates report that I ran yesterday. So as you can see, there was multiple duplicates that I had. What I ended up doing is going into Vault and replacing and deleting duplicate files. You can see it updated, and now there's less duplication in here. The duplicate dashboard is available by default, but your files themselves need to be scanned and indexed, essentially. So when you go into administration and Vault settings here, duplicate search settings is configurable as to which folders you want it to look in. So you would essentially need to do is enable up here, which it is by default, and then add a folder that you want it to look in. So I gave it the designs folder, which is my top level folder for these for all my files, essentially, that doesn't include libraries. And I told it to look in that folder and scan through all those files. Once you do that, it ends up putting a job in the job queue here to scan all of your files that you gave it. Depending on the amount of files that you have, it'll take a little longer to scan, but it does them in batches anyway. So it's not like it's going to time out on the jobs themselves. So if you don't, so the thing about this is, for job processor, what it ends up doing is it offloads any of the work that is typically done by the user. So what I mean by that is, in here, if you have any of these files and you look at the preview, you'll have an image or a model that you can basically take a look at already generated. So typically this model itself, or this file that it's using, is generated on check-in. So when you check in the file into Vault, there's an option, hey, generate this DWF. There's a couple of ways that can go. Is it can generate it on the spot, which typically ends up being a longer check-in process. And if the model is huge, it just ends up taking a lot of time. To offset this time loss for the users, what ends up happening is there's a dedicated machine with a Vault client here that has what's called a job processor. So I'm going to open up a job processor here, and you'll see I have multiple versions of Vault installed. So each one has its own job processor. So we're going to open the one for 2021, which looks like it's already running. So you'll see the icon down here. And what it's doing is pretty much waiting for jobs to come in. So if I send an update to the job processor, the first place you'll see it is the job queue. You'll see that it's waiting to be processed. And by default, the job processor is looking every 10 minutes. You can change that time. On the back end, it's an XML file that you can change, but you can also brute force it by pausing and resuming. Resuming the job processor makes it so that it automatically checks for jobs. So again, when you're enabling duplicate search, it has to index all of your files first. So again, you're going to want it to set up the jobs and make sure that you are that you have a job processor that's running. The nice thing is, even if you don't have a dedicated machine, you can turn on job processor on your own local machine and have it process the jobs. Maybe turn it on at the end of the day right before you leave so that it starts doing these things after hours and it's not impeding you from working or making your computer a little slower. But if you are going to use duplicate search, you will need to do that. If you don't have any files indexed, when you come in here, it'll give you a blank screen, or not a blank screen, it'll give you a message saying, hey, you can turn this on, but you'll need to index your files. Until you do that, it won't be able to let you know which geometries are duplicated in there. Question came in, can any user view the job processor queue, or is that an administrator function only? Any user can view it, specifically since you'll be able to put jobs into it. What may be different here is when you use the job processor here, there's an option as to who can log on. You'll see here that I'm logged on as administrator. So in the settings, you'll choose the username, the password, and then the server that it's going to process jobs for. As you start working with life cycles, or you start working with permissions, you'll have different groups, different users that have the ability to make changes on the files. So if a file isn't released and you're generating a visualization file for it, a DWF that you need to preview it, well, Vault treats that as a modification. So if it's in release and there is no user that can make modifications to the file, when it tries to generate a DWF, it'll actually fail out. It'll, in the job queue, once it tries to process, it'll be like, hey, we can't do that. So what typically ends up happening is you'll create a user called, we like to call it JP admin, or job processor admin. And this JP admin user has permissions pretty much in every state to make modifications. Of course, with that power comes bigger responsibility. I didn't want to get copyright infringement there, but when you create this user, you want to make sure that it's secure. You don't want anyone to have access to the password to log into it. So you want a few key people to be able to have that JP admin account. And then the second thing is you want to go ahead and make sure that that JP admin has the administrator level role over the Vault, as well as has the edit and view functions for your files. So you want to make sure that you apply to all of those so that it can make the changes or process the jobs for them. So, you have your list of duplicate files here. I'm going to go through the one so this is the one that I did yesterday. Spurgear 15 and Spurgear 221 were, even though they have different descriptions, they were the same model from when I checked it and when I looked at it. So what I ended up doing is I found both of them inside of my project explorer here, so 221, and then what I ended up doing is replacing wherever it was used inside of Inventor. The same thing can be done here, so let's take a look at our duplicate report. So Spurgear 12 and Spurgear 14, what you can end up doing here, and the way that you would end up processing here is Spurgear 12. So you have Spurgear 12. Take a preview of it. And again, and Spurgear 14. Yep. So the first thing is a quick visual confirmation, like, all right, is this actually the exact same part? If, for you guys out there that it would have bigger implications in your process, you would go into a deeper dive. You would open up an Inventor, take a look at it, check the weight, check the the material, make sure that everything is exactly the same. Because if it's not, if you have one that's made out of aluminum, one that's made out of steel, those could have, different implications in the assembly itself. So you want to make sure that you double check that. Right now, for the sake of presentation, we're going to go on the assumption here that everything is the same. So we're going to go ahead and replace spur gear 12 with spur gear 14. So now that I know they're identical, what I'm going to end up doing is going to edit, replace. So we're going to replace spur gear 12. It's going to let us know where it's being replaced. And then it's going to allow us to choose which file we're going to replace it with. So now we're going to go to spur gear 14. I'm going to open this up. So now it's going to take any instances of spur gear 12 and replace them with spur gear 14. Because they are identical in geometry, what ends up happening is when you replace it, in Inventor, all of the mates and all of the functionality should remain the same. It's only when you replace files that don't have the same geometry where some of these mates end up breaking and you'll need to fix them. So you're still able to do this with other parts, even if they're completely different. It just, the assembly itself won't automatically remate everything, so you might end up having to fix some of those. But in this case, same geometry, so we're going to hit finish, and it's going to go through and actually go through those instances. This is that warning that I mentioned. Replacing a component in an assembly may change the geometric structure of the assembly. So it may end up causing some issues, but it's the same one, so we typically don't have to worry about this. It's going to go through its process. And again, if it's a part that's widely used, I would consider, if they are identical, I would consider replacing the file with the least amount of connections or instances basically being used. That way you're not, and you don't end up changing the majority of your assemblies, only the few. So keep that in mind. So now I'm going to go ahead and close it. Ended up doing the replacement without an issue. So if I go to where used now, you'll see that this is no longer being used in any assembly. What ends up happening though is because this spur gear was used at some point, so initially it was used when I uploaded. If I try to delete this now, so I'm okay deleting it, it'll give you a file can't be deleted due to restrictions. It's still tied to an older version, which is fine. But as an administrator, you can actually go in through your account and delete unconditionally. So I'm going to go ahead and say yes. Deleted that duplicate spur gear. And now when I go to my duplicates dashboard, you'll see that the percentage of duplicates or the ratio of duplicates has gone down. The amount of duplicates that I have has gone down as well. We still have 3 unique shapes because in that one, we have spur gear 22 as well. So until I completely replace one of those, the amount of duplicate shapes ends up staying the same. Again, this helps a lot of the times when first implementing Vault. There is a sense of getting it to work by brute force is what we've seen a lot. Sometimes the workflow doesn't work out the way that the customer expects it, or a lot of the users are confused on the workflow itself, or the interface between Vault and Inventor. So what ends up happening is a lot of the files go in, with different names, but the same files. So what this does is it allows you to go through and clean it up, make sure that everyone is using the right files and the right name at that point. So that's duplicate search in Vault. We're going to go over a little bit here what it means or how it functions in Inventor. But before that, any questions on duplicate search, whether it be the old way with the file names or the new way with the geometry? All right, so no questions, it looks like. So we're going to look at it in Inventor. So the duplicate search functionality in Vault is basically, hey, it already happened, it's in there, let's fix it. Duplicate search inside of Inventor is on the opposite end. I'm creating a new part. Does it exist already? So what I end up doing here is, so I have a cartridge cover.ipt that I ended up renaming, right? I brute forced it. I created a copy physically on my computer. And I'm gonna go ahead and open that up. So it should be, oh yeah. So not in Vault, named it so that I'm able to know exactly which one it is. So if I look at my Vault tab here, you'll see that it's not in Vault yet. So before I add it into Vault though, I wanna make sure that this doesn't exist already. So you'll see this new button here on the Vault tab to find duplicates. So what that does is it opens up this panel over here and you tell it which component you're gonna search for. If you're in an assembly and a file isn't added yet, you can select which component you wanna search inside of Vault. So I'm gonna go ahead and search, and you can see it found cartridge cover.ipt and it found it inside of Vault. So now that you know that this file exists, it's easier to not upload this file that you just created. And instead, if you're going to use this file in an assembly, go ahead and replace it and pretty much catch it before you go. So this is a nice function. It saves you the trouble of having to do this inside of Vault once it already happened. As you can see, it's the exact same geometry, maybe a different color, but it's a different name. Vault will have no issue with me checking this in. If I go here, you'll see I can now create. So I have the file in there, and because I uploaded, you'll see that now I have 8 duplicates with 4 unique shapes. If I run this report again, yeah, cartridge cover and not in Vault yet. It basically adds it to the report. But if you add this as part of your workflow when you're uploading or initially checking in files, you'll go ahead and save yourself a lot of headaches by not having to do this afterwards. Any questions on duplicate search in Inventor or Vault at this point? All right, going back to this out of date file here. If you haven't done it before, what you could end up doing is getting a revision here to make sure that you're getting the latest of a file. So you'll see right here, I'm using an older version, which is this red one, while the one in Vault was a white one. So when I get the revision, I select the ones that I want to get. You'll see that it updates it to the one that was in Vault. Pretty nifty functionality there that you can end up doing inside of Vault. You'll see that it automatically replaced it. It no longer has the double red arrows. So you should be good to go. Some other functionality that we're getting inside, or that we got inside of Vault Professional, or yeah, Vault Professional 2021. And again, those of you that don't have Vault Pro, you get a little bit more flexibility and granular control over your files. So if you have a file and you hit details, those of you using BASIC won't get these security or effective access tabs just because they're not available there. But what you can do here is you can actually control who has permissions to view, which is read, modify, and delete. That's what was available in Vault Professional 2020 and previous. But now with 2021, you now have this download criteria as well. So if you want, and surprisingly, this is a concern with a lot of our customers that was brought up previously, whether it be, hey, can you view who has downloaded files? Can you control who can download files? It's been a concern with a lot of our customers, and so that's why adding it to 2021 is a big thing for a lot of them. You can control who can download a physical file to it, as well as who can view. You could originally do who can view it, so they can still view it, whether it be in the shop, whether it be other engineers, or whether it be customers that you're letting into your vault. If you have outside contractors, you can control who can download the files, as opposed to just view them, modify them, or delete them, which again was a major concern previously for some of our customers, but they're able to do this now. And what's also nice is if we go to Vault settings, and again, we're going to go to life cycles here. So with life cycles, like I mentioned earlier, for those of you that aren't using it, you have a list of states and permissions that go along to each state. So you'll see that these permissions change as you go. Well, one of the biggest things also that we run into is out-of-date drawings or out-of-date information getting down to the shop. So not only are you able to control who can even view that information before it's ready, but if it's not in released, you can make sure that they can't even download the file now. So that download permission applies to the life cycles as well. So you're able to control all this information again with more ease. One of the things here also on the admin side, so if we go to administration and global settings, what ends up happening is a lot of our customers will have an administrator account and then their own engineering account. So what ends up happening is you can actually configure this toolbar down here, or this taskbar down here, to change colors when you're in as an administrator. So if I configure this, I changed it yesterday, but you can make it pretty bright so that it pops out at you. If I'm logged in as an administrator, like I will be right now, bright yellow. But if I'm logged in as I gave Jose, let's find a user that is not administrator. Okay, so engineer one. Of course, he doesn't have access. So engineer one, vaults, productivity training. So now they'll have access again to the vault. We're going to go ahead and log in. And again, it's a little quirk there, or functionality there that allows you to know quickly whether you're in as an administrator or not. A lot of the times what ends up happening is if you do have access to both an administrator and a regular engineering account, if you're logged in as an administrator and you forget, there are functionalities inside of Vault that are allowed for administrators that you can end up messing up some things. One of the things is that unconditional delete that I did earlier. If you're just working as a regular engineer and you're trying to delete something, it'll give you the option if you're in as an administrator, which could end up messing up some of the relationships that you have. Do item lifecycles allow for file download restriction? So let's switch over here to items, item release process. Oh, oops, I'm not in as someone that has permissions to do this. So I'm gonna log in here as administrator. So under security, download permissions are also available for item lifecycles. So yeah, you can turn them on and make sure that you are controlling who can and cannot download files in your release process. Any questions so far on any of this? So one more functionality here is orphan documentation. So sometimes you may have files that no longer have any relationships. You may have drawings that no longer pertain to any models. In 2021, they added a property that has parents. You can actually filter by this and see which files are no longer being used somewhere. Allowing you to find these orphan drawings, orphan parts, making sure that you maintain your vault as clean as possible. So again, it's a lot of smaller functionalities that will help you manage your vault and your Inventor files a lot easier. Download permissions, we went over this. Any questions so far? Anything, so far we've gone over a lot of these new improvements. Any specific questions that you may have to your workflow? One of the things that that was added to Inventor functionality is actually how it interacts with Revit. It is a pretty niche pretty niche topic, so we didn't include it in this productivity training. But if that's something that some of you may be interested in, please go ahead and put it in the comments. We were thinking of adding it as a separate session for productivity training. So if that's something that you're interested in, just put it in the chat as well, so that we can go ahead and put it as a future topic. So what permission is necessary to allow for item export? Just to clarify, as far as item export, we're talking about the bill of materials export to CSV. And permissions, are we talking about life cycles or roles? Gotcha. I think so. For roles, if we look at global settings, or here, manage roles, let's go to, I believe, so here, if you guys aren't familiar, or if you guys are an administrator in your current environment, you're able to, in the later versions after 2019, I believe, or it might be, no, it was 2020, you can actually create specific roles for your environment, but you can also view the roles that come by default. and check what they're allowed to do. So item reviewer here is essentially allowing you access to the item workspace in Vault Professional. But if you double click it, you can actually read what they are able to do inside of the item workspace. So FileBomb read, and I believe as long as you can read it, ERP export. So it looks like you'll need to have the item editor too. Nope, that's still here. So it looks like item viewer or reviewer will give you the option to export that. It'd be something that I would need to specifically test. Are you trying to limit who can export the items, or just want to make sure that the necessary people have that role to export? Gotcha. Okay. I mean, if it's something you want to take a look at specifically together, we can get together and try to set that up and make sure that they can. If there are any other questions, I know, like we saw at the beginning of the session, there are some people without Vault currently, and if you don't have Vault at the moment, all this information can be a lot. If there are any questions, any specific concerns that you may have, please throw them out now, or not throw them out, but let me know, and we can go over them. A lot of the times it's functionality. It's functionality that, we initially covered, or we do a jumpstart for Vault specifically. It's different than this productivity training because it's more of the basics. It allows you to go more in depth of all the parts of Vault, all of the connections. You go through some examples. So it's different than this. Mario over here says, get Vault. It's a game changer. It really is. In 99% of the scenarios, it changes the way that your workflow goes. There is that 1%. I've seen a customer who built their own PDM interface essentially from scratch. So, there are some cases where their generated tool is works equal to Vault, but other than that, if the functionality that it brings is essential, I would say, to any environment. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and just open it up to questions, specific questions that you may have. As far as Vault 2021, this is what was implemented for this past year. Essentially, 2020 and 2019, they have different functionalities. We do have, like Brian mentioned, AVAs that we have done in the past. On what's new, we've been doing it for the past few years to make sure that you guys are aware of the changes that come. But again, I think if Autodesk were to choose the biggest functionality added, it would be this duplicate search. Definitely allows you to stop duplicates going in and clear up the duplicates that are in there. I know to the users that or some of our customers that we've talked to about it, they're definitely excited about it and got started on it almost immediately. I will be doing a separate AVA specifically just for duplicate search. So if you want to come hang out on that AVA, just please come through. I believe it's scheduled for a month out. We can go ahead and go over some of that functionality then. Any other questions so far? All right, guys. If there's no other questions, or if you want to take any of the questions offline or anything like that, feel free to email me. It should be josedaparedes@ketiv.com. A lot of you already have my email. We've talked in the past. Some of you, we already have calls scheduled for later today to talk about it. Feel free to reach out to me. So I'm going to type it in the chat just so you guys have it. We'll send that to all panelists instead of all panelists and attendees. So, if there's no other questions, again, thanks for coming in today. Thanks for sitting through the presentation. If there are, I know a lot of times in this group environment, a lot of people don't like to ask questions. They prefer to do the one-on-one thing. I'm definitely available to go through that, make sure that we tailor this workflow between Vault and Inventor to fit your needs as best as it can. For those of you that don't have Vault implemented yet, if you have any questions about implementing it, go ahead and send me an email. So yeah, send me an email. We'll talk about it. I'll go ahead and reach out to you, Mario, after this. Make sure that we talk about some of these options. I did see the question about Thunderdome. Let me go ahead and double check on that. I believe Data Standard is available, but Thunderdome might not be yet. I know some of the add-ins that end up coming down the line sometimes take some time. So now that I think about it, I think Thunderdome for 2021 is not available yet. 2020 made it available not too long ago. So it comes out. For those of you that are still on here, Thunderdome is a way that it's a separate add-in, doesn't come with Vault by default. It's made by a different company. But what it allows you to do is essentially make profiles shared across your environment. So if there's some settings that you need to change, or some searches that you need to share, anything along those lines, you can share it with Thunderdome, and it allows you to make sure that everyone is updated as it goes out. Because it is a third party tool, it doesn't come out at the same time as Vault. So even though Vault 2021 came out a little over a month ago, Thunderdome I don't believe is available, because they still, so once the release is out, that's when they start tailoring it to 2021. So it becomes available a few months afterwards, typically. For some years now, the reason Mario asked if it's out is, for some years now, it's been, the word has been that it might not come out. So it's always kind of on that edge, whether or not you should wait for it or manually distribute this your profiles. But yeah, thanks again, guys, for coming through. If there's I'm going to reach out to Mario, but if there's any other questions, please feel free to reach out. It doesn't have to be related to 2021, could be related to Vault, could be related to FLC, anything like that. I'm your guy. And if I'm not your guy, I'll make sure that I get you to the right people to make sure that you have those conversations. With that, thank you again. And I will talk to you guys soon.